Hi, welcome to our Leadership Toolkit series. I am Jen Pasquale, the founder of Lead with Curiosity. And what I hope this series will be for you is an opportunity to learn more about how you could add listening intelligence to maybe a tool you're already using in your organization. So throughout this series, I'm going to interview different practitioners of a variety of common tools, and I'm going to have a conversation with them about what listening intelligence is and how it can be a value add to the work that you're doing already to improve the dynamics and culture and connection within your teams. So please enjoy. All right, so we are joined by Ken Barr Jr. Super excited to have him with us to talk a little bit about not a tool, but instead we're going to talk about a process that a lot of leaders go through, which is interviewing, and what that can look like and how listening intelligence can impact that. So Ken, before we jump in, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself for folks who haven't met you before.
Yes, thank you, Jen. I'm Ken Barr Jr. I am a Gallup certified strengths coach and a licensed professional counselor, and I work with teams and individuals to help them discover, develop, and apply their strengths. You can find me in West Michigan.
Awesome.
Right here.
Over there. So we share a lot of things in common. We've got our listening intelligence, we've got strengths, and we've got Midwest roots. So I have Indiana roots, which I think maybe you and I talked about. But great to have you here and really interested to get your perspective on interviewing. This was not a topic that was on my radar when you and I first had this conversation. We did another session on MBTI, and that was really where I came to you for. But this was a topic that I thought would really help leaders thinking about listening intelligence in terms of interviewing. So before we get into that, let me give the audience just a quick, actually, why don't I let you do that this time? So if you could just tell us your perspective on what is listening intelligence and why is it something you're pursuing?
Sure. So, listening intelligence is an assessment that helps an individual become more aware of the types of information that you naturally listen for. And that awareness empowers you to get more of what you need, but also adjust to the differing listening styles of the people that you're working with.
Yep. Sounds great. So what is your dominant listening style?
My dominant listening preference is connective listening, so highly relational, followed by conceptual. And there are four. So you have connective, you have reflective, you have analytical, and conceptual.
And so mine happens to be that high conceptual. I think the 40 is the top, and I'm like 39 or something for conceptual. So super, super conceptual. So I have that what they call single dominant listening style. So for me, it's really listening for those ideas and possibilities and what could be. That's where I tend to get a lot of energy from in a conversation and the things I really tune into the most. So with that in mind of what those styles are, what listening intelligence could do for a leader or for a team, whatever the case might be, how do you see that being a value add for folks who are maybe in the HR space or regularly kind of in that interviewing seat?
Yeah, I know that it is so often the case that when you're doing interviews that you're looking for a team. You want a group of people who will be able to ask the questions. And when you're done with the interview, really talk about what you hear from the participant to see whether or not they would be a good fit for the role that you're interviewing for. And we have learned that people have listening preferences and they're automatic. When you're assembling a team, it's to consider that when you diversify that, when you have someone like you who leads with high conceptual, there are things that you are going to automatically recognize, notice, and sort of internally document related to ideas and concepts. Whereas somebody with high analytical listening preference is going to recognize a different type of information. And that's part of the reason why, if you can, you're thinking about, can you create an interview team where you have representation from all four of those listening preferences so that you get a little bit of everything from the interview?
Yeah, no, when you and I talked and you had posed this idea, I had truly never kind of considered that the individuals on that panel, sometimes we think of, okay, well, who is going to be their supervisor or who is one of their peers? So the lens through which we choose the people that are sitting on an interview, I don't know how much we often look to who's going to listen for certain things from this candidate or who's going to ask certain kinds of questions to this candidate. So I love that kind of framing of how we can really create some balance and just ensure there's not a gap in what we're hearing from the candidate. Because if all of us are analytic, we're all going to be listening for very different things than if we're all conceptual. And neither of those, I imagine, probably benefits the future team because we haven't kind of gotten a well-rounded perspective of what that candidate can really bring to the table.
For sure. For sure. And when you think about it too, we just tend to lean a certain way. And so I know because of my connective style and how it's so relational that I show up in a very positive way. And I'm going to nod and do those things, even if the information you're hearing is not necessarily going to be something that it's like, oh, yeah, this person is going to be a good fit. Mainly because my instinct is to facilitate a connection and having people on that
Mhm.
team that are listening very careful for the facts and the reasoning is going to help when you have the dialogue after the interview.
When leaders are doing those interviews, what do you think they believe they're like listening without them knowing this, right? What are they listening for? What do they think they're listening for versus what's actually happening?
At its most basic format, you tend to always be looking for, can the person do the work? And that is very simple. That I'm giving the most concise. Can the person do the job? Secondly, is can they get along with the other people on the
Mhm.
team? And so that's a part where it's like you're looking for questions that extract the proof, the evidence, previous behavior and results that confirms that yes, the person can do the job, has the skill, education required to do a good job. And then the other element is how well will they interact with the other people? Because it's rare as the occasion that they don't have any sort of interaction with other people on the team. And you want to know that because they could be so skilled in their ability to execute it. But if that becomes super, how do I say this, filled with challenges for collaboration, well, then that's a consideration you really have to weigh.
Do you think there's a tendency in leaders to sort of listen, I guess, sort of listen for themselves, if that makes sense? Like, I wonder how much people interview and listen for things that feel familiar, sound familiar. They could see themselves in the person. How often is that, I think, I don't know, a barrier?
Well, I do know that highly effective leaders, they are self-aware. They do know what their own preferences are, and they also tend to surround themselves with people who complement. So it's really important to let know that for some things, you're going to pick it up really fast. And for other things, that's just not your jam. And that's why you need a partner or a team that can point that out for you. It's one of the things that I, with time, came to when we would do interviews. It's even on the front end. It's like, here's what I want to know. Here's what I'm asking. But then I would ask the team, what questions should we be asking? What else? What am I missing here?
Now, I think that like what am I missing piece is really important, and how listening intelligence could help kind of create a little bit of layering to that, and give you more perspectives by having that more balanced. But if I am a leader who maybe I'm the only one, like maybe it's not a panel, maybe it's just me walking in. So what for you does that look like? If I've gone through listening intelligence, I understand those listening preferences. I obviously have everybody has a preference of some kind. So what does that look like for a single person trying to kind of be everything once they've gone through listening intelligence?
Yeah, I think the approach there is one that just makes room for the understanding. You're looking from the person that you're interviewing. You're trying to discern what's their style so that you make sure that you really empower them to communicate in a way that's natural for them, but also that you can understand. And those four preferences give you a construct for understanding that other person's listening preference. Because if you start to recognize that they lead with high conceptual, then you have the opportunity to adjust your questioning and even, okay, recognize the concept. Now give me a little bit of the how did you do that? Or how would you do that?
No, I think that's an interesting piece around what language you're tuning into. That's what when you say that, that's kind of what I'm hearing is the potential it could give leaders to tune into language they might not have because now they have something to connect it to. That language indicates this. Now I understand how to adjust to make sure I'm not just getting the answer they want to give, but the answer under the answer.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, there is a pattern that happens where you've seen it on teams where the leader or the small leadership group tends to keep recruiting and hiring a
Hmm.
similar type, depending on
Yep.
the tasks or the industry that may be really successful. But sometimes it's just that you've found people who understand each other and there's high levels of agreeability, but there's still a gap in execution or productivity. So yeah, I really liked talking with this person, but there isn't as much of the thinking about does this person have what we need in order to fill this, whatever that role is that you're hiring for?
And I want to be, I guess, careful or clear with folks who are new to listening intelligence that I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong for you, but I don't think we're necessarily saying that we feel like, you want to go into an interview looking for that conceptual listener and that's that's a check mark on the sheet for whether to
Right.
hire them. It is not necessarily as a filter for should you or shouldn't you, as much as it's a filter for being able to understand who they are, how they think, and how you can engage them in a way that helps you get the best out of them in their responses, the most thorough response, the most kind of clear, engaged response. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. To reinforce that, this is not a hiring tool. This is a tool that deepens understanding.
That is important. So we've talked about the panels, we've talked about the individual leader trying to use this. What about the person sitting across the table? What about the person being interviewed? How could something like this help them sort of show up differently in an interview?
Yeah, I think of an interview sometimes like a presenter at a conference. And when you think about the engagement of the audience, there are certain things that make part of the group lean forward and
Mm.
really pay attention to what they're saying or what they're seeing. And there are other parts of a presentation that make a separate group lean forward and find that they are most engaged.
Mhm.
And in an interview, depending on who's on the panel, you don't want it to be an either or. You want to make sure that you are appealing to those who have reflective listening and analytical listening preferences. So it's more of a yeah, you want to give the audience, the entire audience, what they need in order to see you and how you would fit.
And so if I go through listening intelligence and I learn a little bit about myself, how am I using that in that setting?
Yeah, I think that someone who leads with high conceptual listening, that there's a likelihood that you find it easier to talk about big picture ideas and there's excitement around the possibilities. Somebody in that interview team who leads with high reflective is looking for clues for the way that you execute. And so it's about project management, time, how you lead others. And so you want to be able to, yes, you have the energy and appetite to talk about the concept, but you also need to be able to say, in this task, these are the specific actions I would take, and these are the results that would be the yield.
Yeah.
Does
No,
that make sense?
no, it does make sense. One of the things I had heard, maybe in my initial training, I don't remember where I got it, but it was this idea that analytic listeners are the easiest to lose in a conversation. And that's me paraphrasing, but sort of which kind of makes sense, right? Analytic listeners, just to remind everyone, those are folks that are much more interested, if you will, or listening for facts and data and truths and they just want to kind of know the detail. And some people don't necessarily lead with that information. It might feel dry, it might feel boring, it might not be the thing they want to launch with. But the discussion was if you've got a panel and you've got an analytic listener on that panel, or you've got one person in there, an analytic listener, if you want them engaged, that's a checkbox you got to hit really early. So finding ways to sort of, even if you're not an analytic listener, how do you show up in a way that meets the need, to your point, of the other person. So you understanding yourself helps you understand other people. And so then you can kind of check those boxes and kind of say, okay, I'm going to talk about this job or this role. This is my kind of conceptual part. This is my analytic part. This is my reflective part. And this is my connective part, and sort of hit everything so that you are certain you've engaged the other person.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in complete agreement. And I've even had that experience where I have been interviewed and somebody who I know who leads with high analytical, that very specific preference, they're looking for some proof.
Mhm.
They're looking for some concrete. And if I keep talking in a way that is positive, but also in the realm of like possibility, it's like
Mhm.
proof, proof, please. Anything that you've done that we could actually measure, touch, tangible.
No, well, and I think it goes back to what you said earlier too, with, I think we were talking about leaders, that language, right? Part of the awareness and the value of the awareness is it starts to tune you into the fact that there is nuance. Because I think for, at least for myself, before I went through the certification, I never really thought about this nuance in how I listened. So now that I know it, I'm listening for those words that cue me, to your point, that, oh, that person, they want proof. So I need to double down on proof when I'm speaking to them directly. And this person over here, they're really interested in where could I take the team, or where could we take this project?
Right.
So it is being able to catch those cues. You're essentially going to answer anyway. So it's just being able to catch the cues and then adjust how you answer in a way that is going to serve those people and keep them engaged. And I mean, frankly, kind of help if someone is in an interview and they answer in a way that connects for me, then how I see them and how I like remember them might be different than someone who didn't connect with me at all, right? So I think it is about creating some of that connective tissue in an interview so that you're memorable. And part of that being memorable is being sort of custom.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love the way that you said that because you want that to happen. You want for at the conclusion of the interview that people, that there are things that it's like, oh, and then she said this. And her example of that, if you have explicitly talked about the thing that you did and then the result, and those results are the same thing that they're looking for in this position, you do want that to be sticky.
Yeah. Yeah. Sticky is a great word. We use that in learning and development all the time, right? So we've covered kind of, I think, the three big categories, panels, individual interviews, and then interviewees. Anything else around kind of this concept of interviews and listening intelligence that we didn't hit that you want to end on?
I think that you did cover it. That's the biggie. And it's part like it has value for those that are doing the interviewing, and it has value for someone who's going to be the participant in the being interviewed. So both sides can use it to make sure that they extract the most understanding and really get to know the candidate. The responsibility of the interview team is to try to ask the right questions that bring out the information. Your responsibility, if you're being interviewed, is to prep and share the most valuable information.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely, I think, use cases for either audience. So I'm glad we got to have this conversation because, as I said, it was not on my radar, but really enjoyable one. So, Ken, if anyone is interested in finding out more about you and your work, please tell us how they can do that.
Yes, thank you. I try to keep it simple. Ken Barr Jr. across all social platforms. So you can find me on LinkedIn, on X/Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, Ken Barr Jr. Don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that I can help you with.
Ken, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It's great to have this discussion with you.
Yeah, likewise.